Welcome to Bluff Creek Podcast Radio. I'm Matthew.
I'm Daphne.
And today our special guest is
Jen Swanson.
Thank you for joining us today. What was your life like when you were younger?
When I was younger, I lived in Eagan, Minnesota with both my parents and my brother. My brother was adopted from Korea, so we spent a lot of time learning about the Asian culture and celebrating Korean culture, and we learned how to write our names in Korean, so that was always really interesting. Grew up with a dog. His name was Nikki, and another dog named Sushi. We talked about, I really enjoyed playing sports. I played soccer and softball.
So where'd you go to school?
I went to school at Thomas Lake Elementary, and that was just down the street, so I actually walked to school and walked home.
What was your favorite part about elementary school?
I loved science. Science was my absolute, science and art. I loved to paint and do artwork, but science was always my favorite.
Who's in your family?
I have two kids, Hannah, who's in 5th grade in Mrs. Curtis's class, and Lauren, who is in 3rd grade, and she is in Mrs. Swanson's class, and my husband, Eric, who is at home right now working, and we just got a puppy. We got a puppy a few months ago, and she's only 4 months old. She's a little Westie mix. She's cute and little and white, and she's a rascal.
What was your favorite part about having a dog when you were younger?
Oh, I loved just knowing that someone was there at home when I got home from school. I loved taking my dog for walks, and just knowing that you could always talk to your dog if you needed to. Someone to talk to, even though they won't talk back, you can always, they'll listen.
So what was your favorite thing in your childhood?
My favorite thing was my uncle and dad bought 2 horses together, and they lived about an hour and a half away in Malacca, Minnesota. But my favorite thing to do was to go to their farm and play with all the animals and ride the horses. Even though the horses weren't very nice to me, they bucked me off and ran me into trees, and but I still got on those horses.
Did it hurt?
It hurt. It hurt really bad. But I never was afraid of them, even though they were bigger than me, and I just loved being able to ride them. It was fun.
What college did you go to?
That's a really good question. I went to the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse for 3 years, and then I transferred to the College of St. Catherine, which is in St. Paul, for 2 years after that. And then after I graduated, then I got my job, and I started working as an occupational therapist, and then 2 years ago I went back to school online and did all my class online, and it was through the University of Alabama, Birmingham, so I ended up going to Birmingham to do some of my tests. So I just graduated last year. I just graduated from college for my last degree last year.
So what's your favorite part about your job, and what is your job?
Okay, good question, Daphne. So my job, I'm an occupational therapist. So I see people after they've had a stroke or a brain injury, and I help them to get back to doing day-to-day things in their life. So like if somebody needs to get back to working, or if somebody needs to get back to going to school, A lot of times they've had weakness on one side, like imagine trying to get dressed when you can't use one side of your body. So those are the types of things that I teach people to do to help them to be more independent and so that they can care for themselves. And then I also see people with visual deficits to help them to use equipment. Just like when I showed you these goggles, it was kind of hard to see, right? Kind of hard to read, maybe. It was hard to find things on the iPad. That's what I do, is I train people to be able to use the vision that they have so that they can see better, to do schoolwork or work, or even just to be able to look at pictures or pay their bills or read a book. My favorite part of my job is I really enjoy being able to help people so that they can be independent, so that they can live at home and be safe and be independent with the things that they really need to do.
What's your favorite thing doing out of work?
My favorite thing to do is to probably see people that have visual impairments. My favorite people to see are actually kids. And I just really enjoy I enjoy being able to interact with people.
Which in your job, like, who are the people you like seeing more, adults or your kids?
I see more adults. I see actually more older adults, so maybe people like your grandparents' age, some people that are your parents' age, that have had problems or health problems. But I do see some kids. I have 2 to 3 kids that I see right now. So.
I meet the kids and I often tell them talk about how important it is.
That's okay. You can do this if you want.
I talk about the documents that I have to sign. My signature.
What high school did you go to?
Good question. I went to Egan High School, so it's in Egan. My class that I graduated with was about 400 people. So it was a fairly big class back then.
So what middle school did you go to?
I went to Dakota Hills Middle School, and that's also in Egan. It was a brand new school when I was growing up, so that was cool. Yeah.
What's your favorite food?
My favorite food. Oh, I love seafood. I love sushi. That's probably my favorite. Seafood and sushi. But I like all different kinds of food. And Indian food. I love Indian food. And Mexican food.
What would you do, like, when you would grow up as a kid? Like, what would you play with?
I would play with my neighbors, and we were outside all the time. We would either be sledding or playing at the playground, and we would ride our bikes all day, everywhere we go. I think that's what's different, things are a little bit different, but that's what I did growing up, and it was so fun. I only went home for meals. I go home for lunch and dinner. Otherwise, I was outside playing.
What was your favorite thing to do as a child, and you still like it now?
You know what? One of my favorite things is playing games outside. Like we'll play baseball. Like playing family baseball is fun. I love doing that. Volleyball, Foursquare. I grew up playing Foursquare, and I still like to play Foursquare with my kids. Catch. I really enjoy playing catch. So Hannah and I and Lauren will play catch outside or play 500. Do you guys play 500? Yeah. I like to play 500. That's fun. And board games. I really like to play board games too. That's really fun.
So, like, what's your, what was your favorite thing to do when you were a child, like with your family, like with your parents and your brother?
One of my favorite things that we did was, we like to travel. We would travel by train everywhere. Have you guys ever taken a train?
Yeah.
We would take the Amtrak train, and my dad loved national parks, and so we would take a train to California or Montana, and we would see like the Grand Canyon or Sequoia National Park, and we would spend a lot of time on the train together. It'd take us days to get there sometimes, but that's what we like to do as a family, is to travel.
What kind of dog do you have right now?
Good question. She is a Westie Terrier, so a little white dog, but she's also a Shih Tzu, so she's a mix of two puppies. So she's little. She's a little puppy.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's podcast is brought to you by Buff Creek Podcast Radio, encouraging you to connect with someone new today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.